Behold, my glorious supporter EyePatchNotes has requested a huge topic, elemental resonance, a glorious build crafting aspect of Genshin Impact. Elemental resonance is an effect that occurs when your team of 4 people contains 2 or more that have the same element. Generally, you might spread out elements to have a variety of different effects, but if you have 2 of the same element, you get a bonus, and they're fairly powerful. So we're going to talk about them. They have really interesting buildcraft implications overall. I'm just going to read what they are, just read what all of them are, and then discuss them a bit in sort of a macro level. And then EyePatchNotes, you often include some other notes appropriate to the name in your parlays, so I'll read those and discuss that as well. Another discussion parlay about buildcraft from EyePatchNotes, and I'll start by just reading the different elemental resonances. So Genshin Impact has 7 elements, and you have 4 people in your team. You can't duplicate a character, but you can duplicate elements as much as you want, as long as you have characters that have them. Right now, there are 7 elements, but there are no playable characters that have Dendro, which is like plant, which is like the 7th element. So there are only 6 elemental resonances we're going to discuss. Double Geo, double Pyro, double Hydro, double Animo, double Electro, and double Cryo. Just 2 of every element that we have. There is one where if you equip 4 different elements, then you just get some elemental damage resistance, but we're not going to get into that. So let's start. I'm going to do the 4 that are sort of the core elements first. Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo have sort of like a like 4-way but rock, paper, scissors like relationship, where Pyro counters Cryo, and then Cryo counters Electro, and Electro counters Hydro, and Hydro counters Pyro. And their elemental resonances supplement those identities, but also have an effect that is not as related and is more related to the identity of the element, which is a bit of a separate topic, but I'll get into a little. So we'll go through them. So double Pyro, you're affected by Cryo for 40% less time. All of the double primary elements are going to have that. So Hydro, you're affected by Pyro for 40% less time. So if you get inflicted with Cryo and you have the double Pyro, it just goes away much quicker. So you're not as vulnerable to elemental reactions on yourself. That's nice, but kind of minor, and I'm not going to get into it too much. Double Pyro increases your attack by 25%. You just get, all your characters get 25% damage. So by sacrificing some diversity in your different elements, which could give you more damage against different kinds of enemies and different damaging elemental reactions, you get just 25% more attack. Now, attack percentage buffs are pretty common in Genshin Impact, but that's still pretty good. You can add that utility to a character, and you can still have 3 different elements. You know, 1 different element, 2 different element, Pyro, Pyro. So it's not so bad. Cool. Again, I'll evaluate their power level more later. We're just going to talk about them, what they are. Then we have double Hydro, affected by Pyro for 40% less time. Again, Hydro counters Pyro. This supplements that. And then double Hydro increases your incoming healing by 30%. So all your characters get healed 30% more. I don't know if that affects eating food. Yes, Hydro has a bit of an identity as being a healing, I almost said color, but, element. And so this makes your healing 30% more powerful. There are other sources of incoming healing, but this is a reasonably large one. Double Electro. You're affected by Hydro for 40% less time, yada yada. Superconduct, Overloaded, and Electro Charged, so those are the elemental reactions with Electro, have an 100% chance to generate an Electro Elemental Particle, so that recharges your ultimate faster. That effect has a cooldown of 5 seconds. So this one plays into Electro's identity as a quicker charging, or kind of a hybrid, like utility offensive element. Pyro and Electro are sort of I view them anyway, as your like primary attacker elements. They have almost entirely offensive utility, and Pyro is basically all damage. All the elemental reactions are damage, and then Electro has some very utility-based ones. Superconduct is a burst of damage with Cryo, and then you reduce the enemy's physical defense. Overloaded is a damage explosion with Pyro that just does damage in an AoE. And Electro Charged is Chain Lightning with Hydro. So Electro is, again, kind of like a more utility-based element, for offense than Pyro, where all its elemental reactions are offensive but in different ways. Whereas Pyro, it's like they're literally all like you do more damage, which is fine. It just Pyro is the sort of like straightforward offense is its identity, and then Electro is more of a utility one. So it's interesting how this one lets you charge up your ultimate again faster, your elemental burst. And then double Cryo, affected by Electro for 40% less time. Increased crit rate against enemies that are frozen or affected by Cryo by 15%. Ooh, spicy. Yes, Cryo is a weird one. Cryo is a bizarre element in the game overall. It just has a lot of different directions it goes in. This one increases crit rate if enemies are affected by Cryo, and then frozen is the elemental reaction with Hydro. That one is a little random. Like, why is that one exception? But cements it as a sort of supportive, decidedly a supplement to a damaging effect. So those are the four kind of primary elements. Again, I view sort of Pyro and Electro as being the primary attacker elements, and then Cryo and Hydro are to varying degrees utility. It's also the case that our healers at the moment are primarily Cryo and Hydro. They're kind of healing elements, and there's only very minimal, not none, but minimal healing in Pyro and Electro. I wonder if that will continue to be the case, but anyway. And then we have Animo and Geo. Animo and Geo are supplemental elements. They don't have specific effects when reacting with those primary elements. Animo just spreads them with its swirl reaction. If you hit an enemy with, say, Electro with Animo, then it will swirl and make the other enemies have Electro as well. Very good for spreading them around. It also does damage. And then Geo will crystallize the other primary elements, giving you a crystal you can pick up that will give you a shield against that type of damage, which is also very nice. And then Animo and Geo also tend to be more generally effective. There are less enemies in the game, in the difficult content in the game, that are immune to Animo and Geo. It's very uncommon to have enemies at high-level challenges that are immune to Animo and Geo, whereas it's quite common for them to be at least heavily resistant to Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo. So double Geo resonance, increased resistance to interruption. So in Genshin Impact, I think this means you just can't be interrupted, because every time I've used an effect that says increases resistance to interruption, I never get interrupted. So I don't know, maybe some huge attacks can, but it probably makes you basically uninterruptible. And then when protected by a shield, now remember Geo crystallizes other elements and makes shields, increases attack damage by 15%. So kind of also an offensive effect. Now, what's a little confusing about this is it says attack damage. That might mean normal and charge attack damage. So in other words, like only your autos, rather than the double Pyro, which is increasing your attack stat by 25%. I'm not sure. Still very interesting. Means you have a more generally defensive effect that enables you to do more offense as well, maybe do more Claymore charge attacks without getting interrupted, and then it also increases your attack damage by 15%. Good stuff. And then double Animo. This is the one I like the most. You'll see why shortly. Double Animo decreases your stamina consumption by 15%. So when you're running, climbing, gliding, and charge attacking, you lose less stamina, 15% less stamina. It also increases your move speed by 10% and shortens skill cooldown by 5%. Okay, that's like nothing. This one is for running around quickly in the open worlds. That's right. I love double Animo for just like when you're exploring. You just run much faster. You run double Animo and then like Kaya or Razor that have that passive that gives you more stamina efficiency, that stamina reduction effect from their passive, and you run as an adult because they run a little faster, and you can run for a long time with this. It's noticeable. 10% sounds kind of minor, but you can feel it. Cool stuff. So those are the elemental resonances, and now I'll talk a little bit about what I think about them. So evaluating them, Pyro, it's obviously good. More damage is more damage. There are plenty of Pyro characters that are supportive in nature already. Zhanling, for example, can drop her spicy pepper to increase someone's damage. Bennett is a powerful offensive support already. So there are already reasons to use Pyro characters supportively, offensively supportively. And so making them also add more attack to your team is clearly very good a lot of the time. Don't know how many buildcraft implications it has, and I read ahead and peeked a little bit. EyePatchNotes will go on to mention that because attack percent is quite readily available, it's sort of like the marginal benefit is not that amazing. Like looking at that as being increased attack by 25%, that means you get 25% more damage all the time. No, like that's not. It doesn't feel like that, but it's still good. Damage is still damage. Okay, so that one, it's good, not terribly exciting. I think there at the moment as well, it's worth mentioning, there are a lot of Pyro characters, and you get one of them at the beginning of the game, and Zhanling, another one, was free early on, so if you started playing early on, you probably have her as well. And then Bennett was available in the shop for that currency you get by doing wishes. So a lot of people have most of the Pyro characters already. The likelihood that you have the ability to get double Pyro without getting lucky is very high. So that one's relevant as well. The water one. So this is the one that increases incoming healing by 30%. Yeah, Hydro characters, broadly speaking, do have a bit of a healing focus. Tartaglia notwithstanding. Xingqiu and Barbara both have healing. Xingqiu's water blades exploding heals the active character. And those characters might be interested in using the Maiden Beloved artifact set, which already gives you some healing. You can also get healing on your Circlet artifact, so I'm not sure how valuable it is to get 30% more. Like, how much do you really need to stack it? The thing about healing in Genshin Impact is it's almost always based on HP as well. So you can use healing percent and HP on your artifacts as separate multipliers for health. It's not always ideal to build that, but building like if you're going to build healing percent anyway, then it can affect that. So I'm not sure how necessary it is to allot even more space for healing. And I do think that because Xingqiu and Barbara, for example, are limited characters offensively, I'm not sure how interested I am in going for more healing from two characters that already offer not a ton besides healing. Again, Xingqiu's a good Hydro enabler, of course. But our two 5-star offensive Hydro characters, Mona and Tartaglia, better yet, Mona is a bit of an offensive support as well with her Elemental Burst. It'd be interesting to have, like, you have a healer, and then you can add an offensive character that's not intended to be related to healing, and then you're boosting the effectiveness of that healer so they can heal your offensive character. Okay, like, you're selling it to me. I'm selling it to myself. So it's okay. I feel that when I use good healing abilities, and I don't have impressive healers per se, I find that I don't need more healing. And so I'm not sure how necessary this is, but it's interesting. It's also worth noting, of course, there are a few other elemental characters that heal that are not Hydro. It's a little weird to think that you'd run the only two Hydro characters that don't heal, and then a non-Hydro character that heals. But I guess that's the thing, i.e. you don't have to use the bonus for the two characters that are giving you it. You could have two Hydro characters that don't care at all about healing, but you care about it somewhere else. Sure. Moving on to the Electro one. So this is the one that means when you do an Electro elemental reaction, you generate an Electro elemental particle. It recharges your team faster. I think if you're going to be generating elemental reactions anyway, often with your elemental burst that makes a bunch of elemental reactions, this kind of lets you loop more. And so the idea of Pyro giving an elemental resonance where you just do more damage constantly, and then Electro is giving you kind of like more ability damage, more elemental burst damage, is interesting. It seems very different, but I think they're actually really similar. It just increases the throughput of your team's damage. This one is kind of like a damage buff if most of your damage comes from abilities rather than your team's attacks, like auto attacks. So overall, I actually don't have a lot to say about this one. I think the cooldown, it's 5 seconds. That might be a little long. Like, I feel like a lot of elemental reactions can happen in 5 seconds, So if the cooldown was even a little lower, you'd get a lot more. But there are lots of, there are the Favonius weapons, for example, that give you elemental particles when you get a crit with a certain chance. and then you could have a character that just gives elemental particles. One that comes to mind is Kaya, has a passive where if you freeze an enemy with his elemental skill that is afflicted by hydro, you make extra particles. You can then quickly swap to another character and they'll get all the particles. So you could do that with this, and then also with one of the Favonius weapons, and you could theoretically do like hit one button and you generate a ridiculous amount of elemental particles all at once, or in short order anyway. You can't freeze an enemy and inflict superconducted, overloaded, and electro charge at the same time, but you get the point. So that could be cool for like burst charging a single unit. Maybe it's a little better for that, but again, overall, it's a damage bonus. Which brings us to the cryo one. This is the one that increases crit rate against enemies that have cryo or are frozen. I mean, the interaction between hydro and cryo, that freeze, like it's a stun. It's a long duration stun. You can often just straight up stun lock enemies by hydro and cryoing them over and over, which is really powerful, and this gives you more crit against enemies you're doing that to. That's good. That's pretty good. There are, not a ton of options, not a lot of variety with cryo characters. Something that I don't think I'm alone in being frustrated by. Besides Chongyun, Kaya, Chi-Chi, and Diona are pretty similar. Chi-Chi's a little different, but they're not too different from each other. So the number of different kinds of teams you're going to be able to use this in, I don't know. But they, they can all put out a lot of cryo. You can keep enemies frozen for a long time with all of those characters, especially with Chongyun. So I can totally see that being valuable. I bluntly don't know that you would have enough uptime unless you're using Chongyun's ability to convert attack damage into cryo, and so you have some kind of hydro effect around, maybe Barbara's melody loop, and then you're constantly doing hydro and cryo. What I'm getting at is this seems bad unless you're constantly freezing enemies, but the prospect of running a team where an enemy is basically permanently frozen and then you have 15% crit rate against them, like, that's pretty good. And the final thing about this one that makes it exciting to me is the crit rate. So before I mentioned the Pyro attack damage bonus. Attack percent is quite common in Genshin Impact. Crit rate is not. You often have a situation where you're vying for space to add crit rate and crit damage to get the consistency and also the damage payoff. Because you can only get crit rate or crit damage on your circlet as your primary stat, so you can only pick one. If your weapon doesn't give the other, then, well, there aren't really a lot of good artifacts to choose from for that. It's just Berserker, and there's no 5-star version of Berserker, so the stats aren't as good. You have limited options, like there aren't a lot of readily available ways to get crit. And so if you want that to be consistent, having some substats on your artifacts and then combining it with this, which gives you crit rate, that's pretty good. There are very few supportive abilities that give crit as well. There aren't none. Geo Traveler has a thing where in their elemental burst area with a constellation active, you can get some crit. And so you could give people a lot of crit. That sounds cool. I think this is the kind of thing that, like, in very specific teams, this will be ridiculous, but most of the time, like, you don't care. And that's fine. Like, I don't think that's a problem. I just feel like cryo is kind of a weird element. A lot of the cryo characters we have, there's not a whole lot of range in, like, what they do at the moment. And we just don't have that many that are that good. And so I would be interested to see, like, future cryo characters. This would be something to keep in mind. Okay. That was a lot of information about elemental resonances. Let's read some of what EyePatchNotes had to say, and we'll continue responding. Glossing over RNG, EyePatchNotes says, having 2 of an element has some interesting implications. Running Amber and Zhangling, for example, grants party-wide attack. Amber also has attack percent as an ascension stat, suggesting that she can build stats other than attack percent without missing out. Pyro is well and good, but doubling up on secondary elements like Animo and Geo starts showing the nuances of party composition. Yeah, so something I wanted to mention here is the implication of trying to do 2 elemental resonances, because of course you can. Let's say that you want to get all the damage. So you want to do double Pyro and double Cryo to get that attack bonus and the crit rate from the Cryo one. Okay, but if you fight enemies that are not vulnerable to those elements, you're in trouble. You know, if your primary attacker is Pyro and you fight a Pyro enemy, I hope those Cryo units are going to do the job, because that's the only choice you have, rather than having a variety of elements and then you have many options, right? So I do think it's quite restrictive if you were to build a team that does 2 elemental resonances at the same time, and yet there are some significant payoffs if you were to do so. A lot of these buffs are good together, after all. The Hydro one and the Cryo one. If you're freezing enemies, then getting healing increase sounds pretty good. And if they're frozen, you get more crit against them. Like, that's good. Those work together. The Geo, Pyro, Cryo ones can all give you damage, so you could combo those together to get even more damage. Again, Animo is just really nice, like having that speed, and then if you want the ability to get another one at the same time, you might want to do double Animo and double Pyro or whatever, you know? But it's very team restrictive. Again, if you do something like Animo or Geo with one of the primary elements, you could easily end up in a situation where you don't have a good way to deal damage to enemies you encounter. And of course, you can often go into a harder encounter, a domain, knowing what you're going to fight, and so then it's fine. But there are plenty of domains that are structured such that, you might be saying, okay, well, if I do double Cryo and double Pyro, so what? I'm going to encounter a Cryo enemy, a Pyro enemy, and an enemy with another element? Yeah, there are domains like that. In fact, Clear Pool and Mountain Cavern is exactly that thing. So the game knows that you want to do this thing. Like, this is a game with some teeth. The game is not just going to let you have just 2 elements. The elephant in the room in this discussion are the Fatui. The Fatui skirmishers have elemental shields that are heavily vulnerable to only one exact element, and they're very resistant to everything else. They're not really feasible to kill in a timely manner unless you counter them with the right element. So if you fight a full squad of Fatui skirmishers and you don't have all 4 primary elements, you don't have Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, Electro, one of those enemies is going to be a rock, and it's going to take forever to kill them unless you stun lock them like crazy, which you can do. So for example, maybe you're fighting one of each Fatui skirmisher, one of each element. Forget about the Geo one. Forget about the Animo one too. Those you can counter with whatever. But the 4, you're fighting a Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, and Electro one, right? So you would need, Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, Electro to counter each of them. The Pyro guy is highly resistant to everything but Hydro and is a ranged gunner. What you could do is run Pyro, Electro, and like double Cryo, and then, because you don't have Hydro, at the beginning of the fight, just rush the Pyro guy and stun lock him so he can't do his shield. This is possible, but it's not easy, and if you can kill them fast enough, then you would be good to go, right? But there is a consequence there, the going would be easier with their shields overall if you just spread out your elements. And so for that encounter, the game is really asking you to not just take the more damage. Like, you have to pay a significant cost to do that, which is interesting. So anyway, getting back to what EyePatchNotes was saying, but yes, I agree. I think that the secondary elements as well, trying to combine a secondary elemental resonance with a primary, one of the main 4, not the main 4, but you know what I mean, is interesting, has interesting implications. I wanted to quickly go back to what EyePatchNotes said about glossing over RNG. So EyePatchNotes is talking, of course, about maybe you just don't have another character that has that element. For example, at the time of this writing, there is only one Animo 4-star character. So if you don't have Sucrose, then you don't have the ability to do double Animo. You can do Traveler, and then if you don't have Jean or Venti, which are both 5 stars, you just can't do double Animo, right? Whereas for others, the situation is pretty much reversed. For double Pyro, for example, it's preposterous that the average player doesn't have the ability to do double Pyro. It's almost automatic. The game almost guarantees that you will have double Pyro. Same thing to some degree with double Electro. There's an event at the moment that's giving away Fischl, who is an Electro character, and of course you get Lisa from the tutorial, so like you have double Electro. those primary attacker ones, and I don't think it's an accident that those are the primary attacker elements, are essentially given to you for free. You can definitely do double of those. There are other elements, however, that it's quite unlikely that the average player just readily has access to double Animo. That is not far from guaranteed, is the point. So yes, a very good point. I think that as time goes on, and there are more more than one 4-star Animo character, I think that will probably be less of a big deal, sure. But anyway. You have a math section that has a spoiler on it, so we'll uncover that. EyePatchNotes says, before the reactions rabbit hole, the elemental reaction damage rabbit hole, Genshin has relatively few layers for damage calculation: total attack, conditional modifiers, and enemy resistance. Also crit, of course. And there are quite a few conditional modifiers, but sure. I think Genshin has an average number of layers of damage calculation, but we'll keep going. Attack percent is one of the easier stats to acquire, very true, and one could argue there's already no reason to avoid physical percent or elemental percent on your goblet, so in that sense the Pyro resistance might not actually change much. Yeah, the Pyro resonance, increasing attack by 25%, we were mentioning before how the marginal benefit of that is not so high, and so it puts a premium on the crit rate one, the double cryo. Giving crit rate against enemies that have cryo on them or are frozen is theoretically more powerful in the context of the game's buildcraft overall. It's just much easier to get attack. You get more attack, but not that much more, and attack is just not as valuable as crit rate. One thing to look at in the game's buildcraft, of course, is how much space do you need to spend to get this thing. Genshin Impact has a pretty important aspect of its buildcraft where crit rate in particular you get very little of relative to what else you would get in that spot. So for example, on your circlet, that's the only place you can get crit rate as a primary stat. It's also the only place you can get crit damage as a primary stat, and you get more crit damage than crit rate when you use it as a primary stat. So getting crit rate elsewhere is very valuable because you just don't get that much of it. There's not a lot of ways to get a lot of it, and so it's at a premium, whereas by contrast, attack percent is the opposite. You can get it basically everywhere. You will get it basically everywhere, whether you like it or not, and it's a very common type of buff for other characters to give each other. So, to a lesser extent, the same is true of elemental mastery. EyePatchNotes says, Animo is often a force multiplier for many reasons, because it swirls elements out, because of the Viridescent Venerer set, which reduces enemy resistance. But it might be hard to run as alongside a resonance without getting walled by certain enemies. Right, what I was saying before about how if you run those secondary elements, you may begin to frequently encounter enemies that you just can't do any damage to. If you run like double Pyro and double Animo, you will, in the open world, frequently run into enemies that you just can't hurt easily. And so that's bad, obviously. I want to get back in a moment to the idea of making like an open world team for the end of this one. Again, EyePatchNotes, you said sometimes literally in the case of tower shields and slime helmets, you literally just can't hurt them, right? Maybe as the 4-star character roster grows, novel combinations of elements and weapons will be friendlier to resonance effects. Yes, I think at the moment, a lot of them are rather restrictive. I'm going to talk about a team composition thought I was having to myself a while ago for the open world. So when you're exploring the open world, now it's not hard compared to other content, but for convenience, there's a few things you want. There are a variety of things you want. But Impetuous Winds, the double Animo thing, that stamina consumption reduction and movement speed increase, like think about how much time you spend running around in Genshin Impact. Like running faster and for longer without running out of stamina is a pretty big deal. And so the idea that you can optimize a team to like cut down on that time is meaningful. That's not, again, it doesn't make you more powerful in combat per se, but you get things done a lot faster, and that does matter. And so I started thinking, what is like the ideal open world running around team, right? And there are a lot of boxes you have to check, so I'm going to discuss them. Ideally, you want double Animo, because then you're faster and you have less stamina consumption. So we'll come back to double Animo. And then you want a way to break ore. So you want a Claymore, or I guess Klee, if you have her. And you want a stamina reduction passive. So at the moment, that's only Razor and Kaya. You want probably 2 different elements alongside your double Animo. It would be nice if one of them was Pyro, because a lot of the time in the open world, you want to light something on fire to get it out of the way. A lot of daily commissions require you, or not require you, but it's very helpful to be able to light something on fire. You can do those more efficiently. A lot of chests lit, you want to be able to thaw them. And then, of course, there are those flowers in the open world, the ones that are frozen and the ones that are on fire. It's not the end of the world to not be able to get those, but being able to get some of them is good. So having Cryo or Hydro or Pyro is valuable. Now, Hydro, it rains in the open world, so I do think Hydro is at less of a premium. A lot of the time, you will be given Hydro for free. And so ideally, Hydro is maybe not quite as valuable, but Pyro is pretty valuable. You want access to Pyro for the open world. So given all of those qualifiers, and then the fact that a lot of open world challenges ask you to have a bow, so you want an archer, the team that you're going to make, if you want all those boxes checked, is pretty much like one team. There's one option. The team is basically Razor, Amber, and then like probably your Traveler as an Animo character and whatever other Animo character you have. Now the problem there is, if I recall correctly, Razor and Amber are not adult characters. In Genshin Impact, there are 3 sizes of character. There's like small, medium, and large. And the only Animo character that is an adult size, a large character, is Jean. And Jean is also the only healer that you can fit into this team. So if you don't have Jean and Razor, then you like that. Those are the characters. Like the team is basically Jean, Razor, Amber, and then another Animo character, probably Traveler. Sucrose is probably the best option, which is a little restrictive. And again, like it's not like you need to make that team. It's just it would be highly advantageous to have that team. You have a healer, so you're not constantly needing to eat or warp back to a statue. You have the maximum passive stamina reduction expenditure. You have passive movement speed. There are other abilities that give you movement speed, but you need to maintain them. For a little while, I played with Diona, who's Cryo as it stands. That's relevant to this theme composition. Diona, who has her Icy Paws, that gives you a shield that, with one of her passive talents unlocked, makes you run faster. And I was experimenting for a while with, like, you can feel the difference in speed. The damage is fine too. But I don't think it's worth the time you spend doing it. Like, it's a good ability. There's nothing wrong with that for normal gameplay. But I don't think it's worth swapping to her, stopping, jumping backwards to do the skill, because when you do the held Icy Paws, and then running around with that shield on for a few seconds to have more speed. It does have high uptime, but I think you want passive speed. You want the most passive speed. Here's where it just gets, like, hairy, okay? You can never go back from this. I'm about to tell you something you can never go back from. There's a weapon that is coming to Genshin Impact called Wine and Song. Wine and Song is a catalyst. It's a book. So on the team that I'm describing, you can only put it on Sucrose. The team has to be Jean, Razor, Amber, Sucrose. You need Jean because she's an adult and she's the only Animo character, the only character that fits into the team with a heal. You need Razor because he's the only character that is a different element from... Well, you have to have Kaya or Razor because they have the passive thing. And I would argue Electro is more generally valuable than having Cryo while you're running around. And he's got a Claymore. You need Amber because you need a bow user that provides Pyro. Amber does also have that gliding passive, which is fine. And then you need another Animo character. And because Wine and Song increases your movement speed, it needs to be Sucrose. So Wine and Song is a catalyst that I'll just look it up and read what it does. But it increases your movement speed for every character in the party who hails from Mondstadt. The character who equips this weapon gains 16% attack increase and 5% move speed increase. That's at maximum refinement, so you need 5 of them. This is a 4-star catalyst. So if you get 5 of this 4-star catalyst and your whole team is from Mondstadt, you get a 20% speed increase. Yeah, that's significant. You know what's rough about this, though? It would be on Sucrose, and Sucrose is a medium-sized character, so she's not the absolute fastest character you can have access to. Is there a way to make a team that checks all the boxes, but has the adult character that is running have wine and song equipped? I'm not sure there is. And they have to be from Mondstadt too. So all the boxes being checked. Again, this is like, I know this is silly. You might have been wanting an analysis of this for like high level combat. And I'm interested in that. And I did comment a bit on how I think the balance of each one is powerful. But I think even just on a simple level, just figuring out how you want to build a team for something as simple as running around in the open world is fairly complicated because of the elemental resonance system. So you want double Animo for that running around thing. So this is like the ideal, you're not really losing anything. This is like pie in the sky, you get everything you want. Double Animo, some Pyro, a Claymore user, and then a different element from Pyro. So, Kaya or Razor. So those are not Pyro. So you need Pyro, and then it has to be Razor basically, because you need a Claymore character. If there was a character with a sprint speed passive somewhere else, then you might be able to do that. And then one of the Animo characters then has to be a large size character, because Kaya's an adult, but Razor isn't, and you need a Claymore, and then you need a Pyro character that has to be a bow character. Well, I guess you could have Venti, and then the Pyro character would be a Claymore. Anyway, you could free it up, but you see, and then if you want them all to be from Mondstadt, and then you need a Catalyst user that's from Mondstadt that is an adult sized character model, and 5 wine and songs, so you can fully upgrade the thing. I think that's impossible. Let's figure out if that's impossible. So I think the only person who can carry wine and song is Mona. Mona might not even be a large size character, but let's say that she is. So it has to be Mona as one of them, because you need a wine and song carrier that is an adult sized character. And then ideally you want a healer too. So you need Mona, Jean, another Animo character, so at this point it doesn't really matter. Let's have it be Venti, because then if it's Venti, you have the bow checked off. And then, so you have Mona, Jean, Venti, and then we need Razor or Kaya, and we need a Claymore, so it has to be Razor. So that's the team. And you need 3 5-stars. One of them is limited. Yeah, no, you can't make this team. And you need 5 wine and songs. So yeah, no, it's not gonna happen. But that was my meme team for running around the open world of Genshin Impact. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Yeah, none of us are ever gonna have this. What character, if they were to add a character into the game, what addition would help the most for making this theme? I guess a more readily available Animo Catalyst user that's an adult size character, a large size character. I don't know. Yeah, I guess a character with the sprint speed passive that is an adult and uses a catalyst would be amazing. That would free up a lot of. Maybe they're also like Pyro, for example. That'd be nice. Okay, it's possible. The game has a long history ahead of it. We already have 2 characters with that sprint speed passive, or it's a stamina cost reduction passive, so it's possible. But yeah, probably don't actually bother doing that, but it would make you you'd be 30% faster and consume way less stamina all the time for the whole time you're playing the game. Let me just tell you a little bit about my wine and song open world meme